honestly, it is a dream. I told the honors college students last night when I got to speak at the Ford Center, I said, I had this dream as a young adopted boy trying to find my way out there that I would be a writer one day, and I would tell people that. But things got hard and dark for me in my 10th grade year, and I was facing things that I didn't understand, depression, doubt. I began to drink. I failed 10th grade English. And when you fail 10th grade English, nobody's giving you much of a chance to be a writer. But I had a teacher that I got in the 11th grade who believed in me and who said, you can really write. And all these little miracles of people in your life happen along the way. And somewhere along the way, this adopted boy became a man, and part of that growth was finding out who he is. And it's so interesting that many of you here have known me in a family, and they're my family, but now I know my family. And we have this amazing relationship. And at the time I was writing Dear William, my sister Ruthie, who is my blood sister, a sister I didn't know, we just find each other, and she's writing her memoir. And so you think about from an arts perspective and a life perspective, she's just finishing her memoir and writing about her reality and her life, and there's one reality she doesn't even know. She has another brother. And I'm just beginning to write Dear William, and I'm writing about my life, and there's this reality I don't know. And here we are 5 years later for the first time ever taking the stage. And my sister Ruthie.
This is the most beautiful thing ever because a big piece of my book is losing my father. And he was definitely a piece of the hero of my story, right? And all of a sudden we have a piece of, what's so wild is David looks more like my dad, acts more like my dad, has more mannerisms like my dad than me and my full blood brothers do. And all of a sudden we have this beautiful soul who had been looking for us for 26 years and hired 2 private detectives trying to find us. Yeah, my voice is a little softer than
I'm loud like her father.
Yeah, he talks like my dad. It's just loud. It's so beautiful. Okay, thank you. And so here we are, this amazing full circle moment. I literally changed the entire ending to getting to have this piece of my dad back. And it's just, and almost from the jump, I remember when we first met, we started talking about co-creating together one day and being on stage because we do very similar, in different lanes, but very similar work. And so this just feels like the most amazing full circle moment and such a privilege and honor. I graduated from here. I used to spend so much free time at Square Books. It was one of my most beloved spots. And I used to shop at his wife's store all the time. And I'm just like, can't make this shit up. And here we are, this amazing, beautiful full circle.
No, it's true. So we're moving in the same community. She was here right before we had moved away, and we don't know it, And so Ruthie, I was going to come to this second, but you write about this in your book, There I Am. For this crowd, and I know Richard Howarth, and this will ring true with him because he was closely involved with him. You write about in your memoir, There I Am, and when you were in Oxford, you lost in a most tragic death, and anybody from Oxford will remember this, your closest friend, Laura Treppendahl.
Yeah, I dedicated my book to Laura. And, she just became a precious, precious soul. She was 2 years younger than me, and way before I ever met her, people started telling me, wait till you meet Laura. Y'all, right after I moved to go to college. And we instantly hit it off. I would watch her. She was probably one of the most magnetic people I'd ever met. I watched her walk into a room, and everyone wanted to be in her presence because it felt so good. She just radiated so much love and so much goodness. And I, at the time, in my own little imposter syndrome, when people would say we were so much alike, I'm like, here she is. She just felt like pure love. And I'll never forget that phone call, And a little backstory is I had been in a really tragic accident when I was a senior in high school, and I broke the top 2 vertebrae in my neck. I, shouldn't be alive. I broke C1 and C2. I broke a lot of other things. An ambulance hit me on my car door, which is a big part of the memoir. And, on paper, Laura's injury wasn't as bad as my injury. And Laura died that night. And there's a lot that goes into it, but that accident sent me on such a huge journey because I had major complications from it later. A wire from the original fusion ended up breaking my piercing and piercing my brainstem. So I actually lived in a bed for about 7 years on all the narcotics, and I would have panic attacks at night. I had such severe survivor's guilt because I just would think Laura should be here. If Laura were still alive, she would be changing the world, and I'm just wasting my life in this bed on these drugs, And I would think about it constantly. Laura should be here. Laura should have been the one that lived and not me. Laura should have been the one that lived and not me. And that, of course, I don't believe those words anymore, but that in my really heartbroken state, in a really dark state, when I was very unwell, emotionally, physically, spiritually, I believed that. And she ended up becoming this real beacon for me. Even in writing my book, I would be like, how can I honor this beautiful soul's life? For some reason, I don't understand God's or the universe's decisions, but for some reason I am still here. So how can I honor that precious soul's life who would be changing the world? And I'm not Laura, right? But I want to be of service on the planet. I want to love people the way Laura loved people, and I want to honor her memory by being the most loving version that I can possibly be. So she is a major role in that book because, I dedicated the whole book to her because she was such a massive impact on my life.
One thing I will add to that, one of the most remarkable stories I've heard in my life, because now I have this family and they're from St. Francisville. And I write about that a lot in my memoir, A Little Crazy. And because it has been a little crazy journey. And so I've been able to talk to the Trebendals, and just even recently and over the years. Those from Oxford, she was killed by a drunk driver in Oxford, rattled the whole community. If you want a lesson in faith, let me tell you this. They wrote letters to have the young man that was involved in that drunk driving accident that killed their daughter out of prison, released of the charges. And he went free because they thought, as people of faith, they believed in forgiveness. And he became, and still is, a hospital administrator. And that's a miracle about that story that a lot of people don't know.
What a testament. Well, yesterday you had a new book come out, and you named it A Little Crazy. And I would love to hear, which that in itself is great.
A little crazy.
Right? But also, I would say the biggest innovators I've ever met in my life don't fit in a box. And the world might consider them a little crazy. But I would love to hear your thoughts on why you chose that, what that even means to you.
Yeah. As publication day of my new memoir, A Little Crazy, arrived yesterday, Ruthie, my wife will tell you I began to panic. I thought, what kind of fool publishes a book called A Little Crazy about themselves? It's a memoir. I'm self-identified. But Maya Angelou said, I don't quote her directly. She has a beautiful line that people know themselves. If somebody says they're crazy, they're crazy. But here's the funny thing. I'm here to tell you today, I'm not crazy one bit. I'm so sane that I understood the value in writing a book about the crazy that I faced and the crazy in my life. And I have faced some crazy, but so have you. Some out of your control, some out of your control. So have you. So has everybody in here. You know, and crazy happened to me in 10th grade when people thought I had promise and they wondered if I heard a teacher, and I know this person, they meant well, they didn't know. I overheard somebody question if I was lazy. I was actually drowning and wondering, did I want to live? You know, it wasn't about lazy. It was about finding my identity. But I write a little crazy, and this book starts on a most beautiful moment of me losing everything. Everything. My wife has filed for divorce, and as many of you know, it's a happy ending. We're remarried. I've lost everything. My children aren't talking to me. I've just had a breakdown, which is something we shared. We'll talk about that later. We kind of had breakdowns at the same time. We didn't even know each other. And I'm just in utter failure. And I realized I have to get off substances. I have to dig back down to my roots. This is not what I wanted. And in that, as my mind gets clear, it lights up like a light bulb. And I've had this religious moment with my son, William, in the higher elevations of New Mexico. And my life has changed, and I'm starting to speak things that sound a little crazy. I'm telling my ex-wife, who I'm trying to get back, of this future of how I will work with students. We have not lost William yet. I'm saying I will write books about family and healing. And I'm making her so nervous. Are you okay? Because my family's not speaking. But I had this vision. I said it will be my next book. And so that's how this memoir opens. It's literally about feeling and being a little crazy. Except here we stand today, and I'm not giving away to the end of the book, but it all came true. And here's what's a little crazy. Here's what's a little crazy. I'm speaking what sounded like nonsense, but she can see something different in my eyes of truth. And in that nonsense, this ex-wife takes me back. It doesn't mean it was all easy. It doesn't mean it's ever all easy. In the actual little craziness, let's be honest, who was a little crazy? She was. And she felt the judgment of everybody who said, you should have kicked his ass to the curb and never taken him back. That's a little crazy. And that's what this book is. And I just felt like I had to write. I can tell you, anybody that lives in Oxford, it's an Oxford memoir. It's an Ole Miss memoir. It's a memoir about how we get things done, and it's about the war that some of us feel to fight to get where we think we need to be and where we want others to be able to be. Free. Free. It's a little crazy. And I just thought, I'm just going to own it and call it, and I will take that risk, and people can read it and judge and decide what they want. So, Ruthie, tell us a little bit more about what happens with this wreck. You're in a crisis. You end up in the bed for 7.5 years. So, you know, as somebody who battled addiction, who always will, and we've had this same journey. Your partner now, you know, has such a beautiful recovery story. But yours went on for years in drowning in opiates, and you were paralyzed in essence.
Yeah, I was frozen. And, you know, at the time, so we didn't know for 4.5 or 5 of those years that the wire was piercing my brainstem. I had just gotten married right out of graduating from Ole Miss. I met my very first boyfriend. We were married within 10 months. And, about a year into that, I started having this debilitating, the way I would describe it is it felt like lightning was striking up my head. And every time that would happen, I would feel like I was either going to pass out or vomit. It was so intense. It felt like I was being electrocuted. And started going to a bunch of doctors. They were running a bunch of tests. We would get this film back, and there'd be this little black spot on the film. And I remember a doctor saying, "Oh, that's just the magnet in the machine interacting with this wire. So they used wire in my fusion." So they started me on therapy. Nothing was helping. They started prescribing narcotics. And I remember the first time I took one, all of a sudden I didn't have to feel, at the time I thought it was just physical pain, but I didn't have to feel emotional pain. I didn't have to feel all of these feelings that I had felt as a very, very, very sensitive being. All of a sudden I had to feel that anymore, right? And it just sent me on this very spiraling journey. I mean, I froze. All of a sudden they were giving me more and more because this is not an acute pain. This is something that kept lasting. So you need more and more for it to even touch the level of pain. And I just took everything they recommended. I had little nervous breakdowns along the way. Can you imagine how painful that was? We were so young when we got married. Of course, he did not know how to handle it. We had no tools. I'd never done therapy. I'd never, I didn't know how to handle after the wreck. I was very, very, very disassociated. I came to Ole Miss. I had a big permagrin and a big smile on my face. I had massive disordered eating, but no one knew. I was doing all of this in silence because I just wanted to show up and be sweet and be kind and have everyone like me and, do all the things that I thought I needed to do for belonging and for love. And all of a sudden, my world's imploding. I'd done all the things I thought I had to do. I married the person, I was expecting to start this life that was supposed to make everything okay. I have this husband. We could start a family. I was working at a church, and all of a sudden, a year into my marriage, I'm in a bed on narcotics, watching TV all day, eating my feelings, and so much physical pain, but also so much emotional, spiritual pain. And it was terrifying. It was absolutely terrifying. I would just think, is this my life? This is how I'm going to have to live the rest of my life? And about 4.5 years in, my mother-in-law at the time said, I know you've been to so many doctors, but let me send you to this new one. And everything had been out of pocket at the time because it was a pre-existing injury, and she offered to pay for it. That was the only way I was willing to do it. So I'm like, you can't afford to go to another doctor. And I went to a doctor, and he was like, I can't tell you what's happening until I see you under this spot, and this $50 x-ray showed that the wire had pierced my brain. And, I'm going to use quotations here. I shouldn't be alive or breathing or walking. Like it's a miracle that I'm here, but it's also like you have to get that out as soon as possible because it's like a ticking time bomb. And my dad, our father, I didn't know this at the time. He told my mom and our godfather, who was come visit me. He had stopped to visit our Amish friends because we had Amish friends. And I grew up on a farm, and he was like going to buy a mule or something, and he had told them that he was going to let me know that if he needed to sell our farm, he would, so I could have this surgery. And on his way, he ended up having a freak accident. We don't know exactly what happened. It could have been complications from Marfan's. We don't know, but he fell down a flight of stairs and ended up passing away of brain damage on his way. And so here I was, we just found out about this wire. I'd been in a bed for about 4.5 years. I was really unwell. I was already very unwell on, they already had me on a very high level of fentanyl, which is wild because that's a huge role in this Precious Williams story. And, hydrocodone, all of these narcotics, and all of a sudden, lost my dad. And I just felt abandoned by life in general. I felt abandoned by God. I felt abandoned by all things. I just was like, this can't be my life. I did everything right. I did all the things. I was the goodest good girl. And how could this be my life? And, there's a lot more that goes into it. I ended up having the surgery. I put all my hope in the surgery and fixing me. And another beautiful piece of the story is our father, he was a real pillar in our community, and my godfather ended up setting up a started getting notes from people being like, your dad bought my prom dress. Your dad sent me on my senior trip. Your dad paid my rent. And we were not a wealthy family. Like, apparently my godfather, who owned and ran the bank, said that he would take out loans so that he could help me. And so those people came out of the woodwork and paid for me to have this surgery, this life-saving surgery at the Mayo Clinic. And I put all my hope in, this is the thing that has to fix me and to take away all this pain. And I walk out of there, they did remove the wire that was piercing my brainstem. They did put more bone, take more bone from my hip and fuse it with more titanium screws. But I walked out of there in just as much pain and just as much emotional pain because I hadn't worked on any of that yet. And so I felt more depressed and more hopeless than ever because this was the one thing that could fix me, right? And it didn't fix me. I mean, I was walking, but I was still in so much debilitating pain. And so I went back to the bed for 2 more years. And when I left Mayo, they had me on even more. And then they had added morphine. So I was on even more narcotics. And I got right back in my freeze state in that bed. And it took about 2 more years. I could tell my marriage was coming to an end, which blame him, right? I can't imagine how painful that was for him. And I could tell my marriage was coming to an end. I was losing my mind. I stopped sleeping altogether, and I had to move home because I couldn't take care of myself anymore. And I moved in with my family. And, it was one of I've never felt shame like that in my life because I had always been like a really popular girl. I was homecoming queen. I'd always been so good and, really respected and looked up to. And I was like, really, that was the most important thing to me is what other people thought of me. And then here I was losing my mind, having a nervous breakdown, knowing that everyone was talking about it. And I was in so much shame. I felt like I was cloaked in shame because every ounce of identity that I had built up around myself of what my value and worth was crumbling, completely shattered, was dying. And I'll never forget my brother, Tim, who was a doctor, looking at me and he was like, babe, you can live in your bed and hurt all the time, or you can learn to live again and hurt. And right now, those are your 2 options. And I remember just feeling like, I want to learn to live and hurt. And so that began a journey. I ended up weaning myself off of all the medicine. It took me about 4 months. And there's been so much that's happened since then. But that began such a deep journey for me of unlearning so much of what I thought mattered and so much of what I thought made me special and important. And it sent me on this deep, deep, deep healing journey to understand emotions, understand trauma, understand disassociation, understand how to feel emotions, how to process emotions, understanding my value that I'm worthy just because I exist, right? As do all of us. And it has been a wild, nothing about a healing or wholeness journey is a linear experience. There has been a lot of heartbreak, a lot of devastation, a lot of hopelessness, a lot of despair. And what it has invited me into, I wouldn't change one single thing. I wouldn't change one single thing. And we'll talk more about the work that we get to do today, but it's been quite the journey. Nothing about my life looks the way I expected. And thank God, right? Thank God, because I really love the woman that I am. David, I would love to ask you, so, your precious William, who lost his life to an unexpected overdose, and your father that you never got to meet are major, major, major characters and roles and guides, I would say, almost, in this book. And I would love to hear about that and how that even played out for you.
Oh, that's a great question. So I'll be giving away a little crazy here, but you have to read the book to really understand it. But so I'll give you a picture of back at what used to be called Oxford Junior High School, when, say, I'm in 9th grade and crisis is beginning to find me. And I win some award, silly award that happens in schools, and I'm called up to the stage, and it had some name like Best All Around, I think is what it was for the school. And I'm walking up there to get it, and I felt so bad about myself. I was failing several classes, and I was very depressed, and you know, my shoes were too big, and I've got acne, and this voice is just telling me, you're the worst. You're the worst. And I'm like, the wrong guy is getting this. And trust me, that's true. The wrong guy there was nothing best all around about me. Farthest from the truth. And that was for the early stages of that voice beginning to live in my head that followed me. And some of you can relate. It's everything good that I would get. That voice would just push me away from it and make me tear it into a million pieces. The love of my life, a good job, a book that I should have written better. And as I began to work on me and realize I didn't care, I'm trying to be a great father and be a good husband, but I hadn't even been the first good to myself or respected myself for a minute. And as I went through a life transformation and began to remove distractions and think, I definitely am enough, and I need to figure out how to be my strongest and most reliable and best me, I began to eliminate those negative voices, honestly, completely. And what happened then is I began to, as we went through trauma later in life, nearly losing one son, our daughter battling an eating disorder, us working to get our marriage back, my own battle with addiction, trying to rebuild a career that I'd thrown in the trash, trying to rebuild respect that I'd thrown in the trash. And I lose my son. And he becomes this voice. You know? I used to think talk of angels was silly talk. Until, you know, my son began to save me. And I would get in a moment of crisis, and this voice no longer trying to beat me, this voice would say, Dad, pause, think about this. And it just became this voice of reason and trust, just like my son and my daughter and my wife and other friends on this earth today, you know. And then somehow, this guy that barely got a bachelor's degree ends up working in higher education and ends up doing work in high schools and everything and trying to help students find a path to betterment. And lo and behold, by the way, my birth father, who I never met was a school superintendent who made his whole career doing that. And as that would get stressful and times it hard and wondering, what am I doing? Instead of turning to self-medicate like I used to, and I'd be out on the road and tired and fatigued, or wondering, should I do this or not? Here I have this other voice, Lloyd Lindsey, my father. And again, people will say to me, I'm so sorry you never met your father. And I would say, I am too, but I don't feel the grief that you do, because I am half him. You know? And it was this thing in me from my childhood onward that was there, and I felt it, and I wanted to just fit into where I was, the family where I was. I wanted to, and I would try, and I would vow, just like the addict, I will just do better in this family. I will do better at me. But I just had this powerful yearning and voice to break out as a storyteller, to try to find ways to better understand myself and better understand community, and better understand others, you know. And so I love that question so much, Ruthie. It really is faith. I didn't understand it before, but I found my angels, and they are literally in heaven. And it's as real can be. And it may sound a little crazy, and I get it, but that's the foundation of this book. It's this boy who is at war with these voices, and he's being pulled to church, and he doesn't understand it, and he's like, get me out of this crazy land. The whole world seemed crazy to me, honestly. But then I actually learned what faith is, and I learned what an angel is, and I learned what trust is, and it helped save me. That's this book, you know. That's what's a little crazy, and that's why I say on the Maya Angelou line, if people say they're crazy, they're crazy. I used to say I wasn't crazy, but I damn sure was. I'm not crazy a bit now. You get the same guy every single day, year after year, day after day. I'm not crazy a bit, but it's because I really learned and understand what faith is and how to trust that and how to follow that. And it changed and saved my life. And so I still have that relationship with my William, and it's a big part of the work we've done, you know. And so that's why it felt so important to write this book. I mean, I already know what my next one is, but I didn't feel like I could vault from Dear William all the way to this relational thing about fathers and sons, which is where I'm going next, the generations of fathers and sons. And it's not near as nutty as these first two, I promise. But it felt so important to fill this gap of the underlying issues of addiction. I absolutely don't want to be defined by addiction. I'd rather be defined by the whole scope of humanity of what we grapple with, and that starts with mental health. I mean, that starts with mental health, period. And I could not move on without closing the loop on that. Ruthie, one thing that I will ask you that we didn't even really talk about, though we did just a minute. I almost want to say this as much as a statement for you, and I'm curious certainly what you have to say, but just humbly, I think I know what you'll say. My sister's not going to tell you this, but and she would also probably say, it doesn't matter, we'll find out in a minute. But it's interesting in a bookstore. I do want to tell this little thing about her. So when Ruthie's book, There I Am, was coming out in 2020, it was a big book. It was a Simon & Schuster imprint book. It was a big book. The kind of book you know will make a ripple. It's a very good book. The kind of book you know will make a ripple, and she's prepared to do bookstore events. But see, life is unique. All our lives were interrupted in March of 2020. Her book came out in April of 2020. Books went on to sell dramatically once that thing was figured out of how they're going to do it. But there was a moment in April in 2020 where people had big dreams. I'm going to open a new restaurant. I'm going to have a book. And there she is. And we all had big dreams derailed. And some good things come out of it. But there was so much other loss going. You handled that about as well. I remember watching that. And you're having to do a book launch on Zoom. And literally in those days, bookstores at that time, they hadn't even figured out how to sell on the curb. They would just generally close. I'm so thankful of how you handled that. And that's why this was so fun to me for us to do this together. You've never said it, but I say it. You deserved a bookstore event. You deserved a bookstore. How did you handle that, and what was your thinking at the time?
It was wild. We had a massive book tour planned. I remember them saying, like, we don't usually push new authors this March, and so, you know, my little pride, I was so excited and grateful, and I'm sure my ego was so puffed up, and here we are about to take off and go across the country, and, you know, you work on that book. I've worked on it for over 3 years, and all of a sudden I was going to be able to be in front of people and putting this out, and my hope and prayer and and heartbreak. If you're a human, these are the earthful human experiences, right? And so I really hoped that this book could be an opportunity for people to feel less alone, and I wanted to go out there and share that. And instead, I'm like sitting in my underwear in my house with a nicer top on Zoom calls and trying to figure out how the hell we're going to like put this out there when you can't go out and be in front of people, and people are really traumatized. It was terrifying. It was so scary, and I had a lot of feelings about it, but then I also was like, Ruthie, this is a book launch. People are dying. People are losing their lives. And, you know, it was a both and. I felt grief and loss for what I had dreamed and hoped and what I thought this book could be able to be in the world. And in the bigger picture, you're like, who really cares? But I think one thing that I would remind myself of, I was like, the people that do find this book, even though, you know, like we hadn't figured out how to do it 3 weeks into COVID. We really hadn't figured it out. But the one thing I just kept thinking, I'm like, whoever is supposed to find this book will. And wow, like this is a story about being all alone in a bed, feeling terrified, going through so much trauma, so much loss, death, heartbreak, and this can be a really beautiful solace prayerfully for the people that do find it. And you know, that does not mean that my human self also didn't feel sorry for myself at moments. It really thought that I'm like sitting in my underwear at home by myself, you know. But I did have that perspective also. And, you know, now it's so interesting. Like, I love the version of me that wrote that book. I am very different today. And I believe that's a part of everything. Writing takes you on a massive journey. It is not for the faint of heart. Like, writing a memoir will kick your ass in every which way, upside down. And because, you know, when I was living those things that I was writing about, I was very disassociated, and I was on a lot of narcotics, so I wasn't feeling a whole lot, right? And now I'm like very sober, going back into all of my deepest wounds, my deepest traumas, my deepest heartbreaks, and it was painful. It was really painful, and it changed me in a lot of ways. It changed me, and it sent me on an even deeper wholeness healing journey of like, wow, I didn't even realize. Like, you get to start seeing patterns of like, wow, I was really unconscious about these things. There was a part of me that like found so much worth and identity in what these specific types of people thought about me, and you start becoming aware and conscious of these things, and you're like, oh, that doesn't fit for me anymore. I don't want to live like that. I don't want to unconsciously use people. I don't want to find my worth and value in what people think and what people think I look like and act like. And you know, it's a lot of your own conditioning that we've all experienced in this life. And so that book, you know, I love that girl who wrote that book, and she invited me into a very newer version of me. And listen, this version of me, I'm sure 5 years from now, I'll be like, that precious little girl thought she knew things. That's the beauty of like growing older and wiser. And you know, there's certain things about that book that don't fit anymore. And I'm so grateful that I wrote it, because it invited me into a newer, truer version of me, even though it was really painful in a lot of ways. It was really painful, and the parts of me died. Parts of me died, but it was all these conditioned parts of me, of like the masks I wore for belonging, the masks I wore to feel special and important for people to like me. And now, you know, a lot of that doesn't fit anymore. And I'm grateful for that book. I'm grateful for that time. I'm grateful that, like, you know, there's another piece of this, that book is very much my pain story. And I was very, very, very defined by my pain story for a long time. I still live with a very, very, very high level of chronic pain. And it's hard, you know. It's really hard, and it's exhausting. And, you know, I don't want to be defined by this pain. It is a piece of me. It is a part of me, but it is not who I am. It is what's invited me into being a truer version. And I love that, you know, and I wouldn't take that away. I couldn't be a they have lived through hell. They have lived through hell. And they have used that to become these truer versions of themselves. And they have used that to be of service in this world. They have used that pain in a purposeful way. Like that, I see you do that constantly. You have taken so much devastation, so much loss, so much heartbreak, and you have used that to create so much healing in this world, to be of service in this world. And, that is the prayer I have for myself every day. I ask God, use me. Use my voice, use my heart, use my eyes to be of service in this world. And I couldn't do that if I had known such severe pain. I have a question for you. I feel like, honestly, Dear William and A Little Crazy, they're really love stories. They're love stories. And I would say, first and foremost, it's a version of you learning how to love yourself, learning how to love your family in a truer, more authentic way, learning how to be love in this world. Would you agree that these books would be, I would call them a love story?
Yeah. The trick in publishers, in book publishing, they have to categorize, and it's hard for them. So they take a book like A Little Crazy, and they assign it the mental health memoir and mental health categories. It's a love story. And Dear William is a love story. It's about fighting for family. We all have this dream. We all have families, and we want our children to have it better than we had it. And we hope ourselves, and we want to love our partner. And I didn't know how. I'm not blaming people. I was so thankful I was adopted and people cared for me, but I didn't really have the modeling. It just wasn't something I knew and understood. And my children, I didn't know any blood on this earth until I never saw a single speck of blood on this earth until my son William was born when I was 24 years old. So in 24 years, I'd never seen anything that remotely was related to me, or not that I knew of. And so I wanted that so badly with my three children. And again, when you don't understand yourself and you don't literally love yourself, when you treat yourself like a dish rag that's got spoiled milk on it that needs to be thrown out, it's hard to then really serve those around you. And I wrote these books as just inside the struggle of a man to find and appropriately give love, And that's really what it was about. And the funny thing is, those of you who know my friend Neil White, and he always says we're brothers. And we are brothers. And I made a joke with him in the year 2011, maybe. And so at that time, I still was just about to lose my marriage, early 2011, late 2010. We hadn't lost William. We had another. It was looking bad. It was looking bad, but it was still kind of intact. And I was writing books I didn't feel good about, and I never gave them what they needed. And I told Neil, "Oh, this memoir is doing so great for you. I'm almost jealous. You got sent to prison." I mean, I want to write a memoir. I said that to him. And what I realized is later, I went to prison. I went to prison. For sure. And these books are about my trying to get out and reconnect with all the people that I've been locked away from. The people that I wanted. I was free to go, except I didn't want to go, and that's what it's about. And I will say this on that, and then I have one more little short thing for Ruthie, and then we'll wrap this up and see if there's a question or two. You said loving myself and appreciate that boy who had a hard time accepting any success. I've learned to own it. Y'all saw my news last night. My Dear William is going to be a movie. I've been working hard on that for years. We found a fabulous director and a fabulous producer, and everything they're doing these days is getting into theaters in the faith and inspiration space. And I mean, they've secured initial funding, and we're aiming toward this thing filming in Oxford. And I get to be involved in it in a level, and we're going to tie this thing into the William Magee Center. We're going to tie this into this grassroots movement we're doing. And, I'm proud of that. And so much of it, though, is, so much of it is that my wife and my children and daughter-in-law and my family, they allowed me to write this. Do you know this? When you read this book a little crazy, a couple of times you're going to go, oh my gosh, did he really write that? They let me. They allow me, not worried about how do they look. Do they look good because they support me? But they don't ask. They trust me because they have literally seen help and healing that we have been able to bring others through this. It's not we, that the storytelling has brought to others, not we, that the storytelling has brought to others. So they support it. And, it's led to a new podcast where we get to have a lot of these discussions. We have a couple of episodes coming up with Ruthie where we dig deeper into that. And you can check it out. It's called A Little Crazy. And A Little Crazy has been optioned for a movie also. In the same group, and they said, we'll see how well this Dear William does, but they weren't about to let it go. And so it's a very exciting time. And I tell people that read my books, you may think you're scared of these books because they seem like they're sad or deal with heavy subject matter. These are books of joy. These are books of human triumph and fighting and persevering against the odds, and I'm very thankful for that. And speaking of that, and if we have a second for one or two questions quickly after this, we'll take it. Ruthie, we'll let you wrap it up before we do that. Tell us, how have you, so that's kind of how I've transferred, and a lot of these people have been able to watch that. You're talking about pain, but you have found your joy also. And how have you transferred into that in purpose?
First, I was going to say, I'm so proud. And what I know that I know, I mean, all of our family is so proud of you. My mom and my brother, my sister-in-law, my aunt, we are all, and I know that our daddy is cheering you on. And so doing such profound, beautiful work that is so needed in this world. And, for me, what this is translated into is I get the honor and privilege of, I don't even know what you call it. I guess I'm a life coach. I don't know. I work with, a majority of my clients are therapists, but then there's also a wide variety of a bunch of different, I get to hold space for a lot of stakeholders, and I only offer and share and mirror what I have needed so desperately for myself. I was really, really, really unwell for a really long time, and that has set me on the most incredible path and the most incredible journey of learning how to handle mental health, to be with my emotions, to actually learn how to bring so much self-compassion to the parts that I thought were dirty, bad, evil, sinful, whatever it is, that I had so much shame about, and learning through practice how to bring compassion and care and love. Because we get to be so human, right? We just get to be so human. We are not meant to be perfect. We come here and make so many mistakes. And I don't even really believe in failure, because if you learn from it, that is so profound. That's how we learn. And so I get whatever broken, heartbreaking loss that you've experienced, this is not the end of your story. This is not the end of your story. There is so much hope and resilience and redemption on the other side of this loss, on the other side of this pain, on the other side of this heartbrokenness, on the other side of this breakdown. I've had lots of those. And what it has sent me on the journey of, I could not do this work today. I could not be this woman today. And what an honor. What a privilege. I want to be of service in this world. And so today that looks like coaching. That looks like leading retreats and workshops. And it looks like, writing. It looks like speaking. It looks like giving really practical ways to bring so much self-compassion and love back to yourself. And I don't believe that that's selfish at all. I think the more we learn how to bring care and compassion and love to ourselves, the more we're able to overflow and love and bring compassion and care for other beings. Because we talked about this in the podcast today. What I know that I know that I know is no one on this planet has ever healed through shame. Ever. You can be toxically motivated by it, but you will not heal by shame. We heal through love. We heal through love and learning tools to bring that care and tenderness and compassion to the parts of you that have made the most brutal mistakes, that has failed miserably, that is lost, that is really effed up. I love the fuck word, but I'm just saying. That for me is like, I can't think of a better way to show up in this world, right? Is to bring that kind of compassion to ourselves and to other beings. Because when we do that, we're not going to other people anymore, right? You realize we're all just human. We're all just so human. We love to think this, it's so easy in our little dualistic minds to think it's like they're the good people and those are the bad people. We're all just so human. And everyone's just doing the best they can in this moment. And so that's my prayer, that's my hope, to be that for myself and to be that mirror for other people. And I know that I couldn't do that if I had lived through what I've lived through.
Wow. Okay, we just have a minute or two because we're committed to the schedule. Does anybody have any questions? We can't get out of here without a question. Does anybody have one question? Yes. Clint. I see one. Clint.
Yeah, David, you obviously been through tremendous adversity and suffered incredible loss, but have gone on to have such an amazing impact in our community, in the lives of students, and everywhere you go to speak. I wondered if you could talk a little bit about how that outward focus has impacted your own mental health.
Yeah. Oh, my gosh. Yeah. Thank you, Clint. It has truly reinforced to me, you think, oh, I'm not alone. Everybody deals with something. But let me tell you, walk into high school in this environment, say in Baltimore or North Carolina or New Jersey, like I have, and talk to a whole student body about what they face and what you faced, and bring it on terms that will get them a little mushy and thinking. And it has not, it's almost been at times more than I can take of what they face. Oh my goodness. We're talking about it and we're reading stories about it. They are really facing something. And what it has done for me, it has completely normalized me, because I'm seeing these young people just pour their hearts out to me. And I'm not qualified. I'm not a professional. I'm a lay person in that, on their terms and their level. And it has truly reminded me that, and so Clint and I were actually friends, and I wanted to be a good friend to Clint. I was actually not that reliable when we were friends in junior high school, because I was trying to cope in my own fantasy world, and he's been a good friend to stick by me for a lot of years, in spite of that. I hope because he's seen the real person, emerge as an adult. And Clint, when I see those young people, it makes me feel so normal. Because even what I faced was nothing like what they face today. And they are, we need to think about how we re-engage communities and how we re-engage communities in storytelling. And it's not just churches, it's not just schools, it's not just parents, it's actually all of it. And it's not just the death of the community communication tool, from church newsletters, bulletins to newspapers. It actually is all of it. We have to think about how do we get a nucleus in community again so that we are brought together like this, because the forces out there nationally will try to divide us and split us and make us think we're different. We are not that different. We are not. And that's what it's done for me. It has normalized me, but made me want to go fight for it. I'm old, I'm tired, but I'm not giving up. I still have some gas in this tank. That's what it's done for me. I thank you all so very much. What a blessing to be here with my sister. What a blessing to be here with you all. Thank you so much.